In the city's most elite restaurant, a young black waiter serves food to an old man in torn clothes. Suddenly, the man gasps for air and collapses. His fork slips, the plate shatters against the floor, and chaos erupts. The manager rushes in and without hesitation points at the waiter. It's his fault. Within hours, the restaurant's golden image will shatter, and the truth about that homeless man will shake the entire city. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. Daniel Carter had worked at the Golden Door for 3 years, 2 months and 17 days. Every shift felt longer than the last, a slow eternity where he was invisible to everyone except the rare customer who looked him in the eye. The Golden Door wasn't just a restaurant, it was a monument to money. Brass polished like gold, chandeliers glittering with salaries, marble floors from Italy, tablecloths so crisp they could stand on their own. From the street, it looked like heaven. Inside, it felt more like judgment. At exactly 4:45, Daniel pushed through the employee door 15 minutes early, like always. His grandmother Rose had taught him that since he was 16, baby, being on time means being early. You gotta work twice as hard to get half as far, but keep your head up and your heart clean. She'd been gone 2 years, but her voice still followed him through every shift, a whisper of grace in a world that rarely showed any. Well, look who's early again. Roger Hammond's voice always carried the scent of coffee, cigarettes and contempt. The man ran the Golden Door like a dictator with a grudge. "Good evening, Mr. Hammond," Daniel said, buttoning his vest, ready for the 5 o'clock shift. "You've got Section C tonight. Don't screw it up. We've got real guests coming, people who matter." Section C, the graveyard corner, where they seated walk-ins, latecomers and anyone Roger decided didn't belong in paradise. Daniel had served that corner for 2 years straight. The pre-shift meeting was short. Orders barked, praises handed out like rations, never to Daniel. Then the doors opened and the performance began. Silverware clinked. Wine glasses caught the light like tiny suns, conversations hummed with money and ego, and Daniel, steady, invisible Daniel, glided through it all with quiet precision, refilling glasses before anyone asked, clearing plates without a sound, the kind of perfection no one noticed until it wasn't there. At 7:30, Roger appeared at his elbow, face flushed. "Carter, Section C is a mess. You don't have what it takes for a place like this. Maybe you'd be happier flipping burgers." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice steady. "I'll handle it, sir." And he did. Because that's what Daniel Carter did, he handled it. The insults, the hours, the weight of trying to stay dignified in a place that refused to see him. By 9:45, the last tables were clearing out, chandeliers dimming one by one. He was ready to clock out, maybe catch the late train home. Then the front door opened one last time. Daniel was clearing table 29 when Roger's voice sliced through the fading chatter. "I'm sorry, sir, but our kitchen closes at 10. We're not accepting guests for the evening." At the entrance stood a man in a worn brown jacket, hair gray and unkempt, a faded backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that lived deep in the bones. "Please," the man said quietly but steadily. "I've been traveling all day. I just need something to eat. Anything. I'll order quick, I promise." Roger crossed his arms, his expression one of barely concealed disgust. "The Golden Door has standards, sir. We require proper attire. And as I said, we're closing." Daniel felt something stir in his chest. He knew that look in Roger's eyes. This wasn't about closing time or dress codes. It was about the man's appearance, his worn clothes, his backpack, the assumption that someone who looked like that didn't belong in a place like this. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn wallet. "I can pay. I have cash. I don't want trouble, just a meal. Please." Roger's expression flickered. Daniel could see the calculation happening. Cash was cash, and the Golden Door's policy was officially that they served anyone who could pay and maintained appropriate behavior. The dress code was technically discretionary. "Fine," Roger said after a long pause, his tone dripping with disdain. "But you sit in the back section, and you order immediately. We close in 15 minutes. Thank you so much." Roger turned, his face twisted with contempt, and his eyes landed on Daniel. "Of course, Section C. The back corner. Where they put people like this man, people Roger deemed unworthy of the main dining room. "Carter, one more table. Make it quick and get him out of here." Daniel nodded and approached the entrance. Up close, the man looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s. His face was weathered with deep lines around his eyes and mouth. But his eyes themselves were kind, a soft gray that reminded Daniel of early morning fog. There was something about him that didn't quite match his appearance. A certain dignity in how he carried himself despite the worn clothes. "Good evening, sir. Right this way, please." "Thank you," the man said, his voice warm with genuine gratitude. "I really appreciate this. I know it's late." "It's no problem at all, sir. We're happy to have you." And Daniel meant it. Unlike Roger, unlike the other servers, Daniel saw a person who needed help, not an inconvenience to be dismissed. Daniel led him to table 35, the furthest table from everything, tucked into a corner that most guests never even noticed. But Daniel didn't rush. He didn't make the man feel unwelcome. He pulled out the chair, handed him a menu with the same care he'd show any guest, and gave him a genuine smile. "Can I start you with something to drink, sir?" "Just water, please, and maybe some coffee if that's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all. I'll be right back." As Daniel walked away, he could feel eyes on him. Other servers watching, whispering among themselves. He caught snippets. "Did you see that guy? Can't believe Roger let him in. Probably doesn't have enough for a tip. So glad I don't have Section C." Daniel ignored them and headed to the service station. He filled a water glass with fresh ice, started a fresh pot of coffee, not the old stuff they'd been serving all night, but fresh, and grabbed a bread basket with warm rolls. Small touches that showed respect, that treated this customer like he mattered. When he returned to table 35, the man was studying the menu with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. There was something thoughtful in his gaze, like he was seeing more than just menu items. "Have you decided, sir? What would you recommend?" The man looked up at him directly, making eye contact in a way that felt genuine. "What's really good here? Not what's expensive or impressive, what's actually good?" It was a simple question, but Daniel noticed the way he'd asked it. He was testing something maybe. Or just being honest about what he wanted. "Honestly, sir, the roasted chicken is excellent. Chef Andre does it with herbs and lemon. It's simple, but when it's done right, it's one of the best things on the menu. Comes with roasted vegetables and potatoes." The man smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That sounds perfect. I'll have that. Thank you for the honest recommendation." "Excellent choice, sir. I'll put that in right away." Daniel headed to the kitchen where the mood was decidedly sour. The staff was already cleaning, preparing to close. One more meal was not welcome. "Last order." Daniel called out, sliding the ticket into the queue. Chef Andre snatched it up and scowled. "Roasted chicken. At 9:50 at night, who orders chicken this late?" "A paying customer," Daniel said evenly. "A bum more like," Roger said, appearing in the doorway. His voice was loud enough that several kitchen staff turned to look. "I should never have let him in. But he had cash, so here we are. Make the plate, Andre. And make it fast. I want him out of here as soon as possible." Andre grumbled something in French and turned to his stations. But Daniel noticed something odd, something that made his stomach clench with unease. The chef's movements were hurried, almost careless. He grabbed what looked like a chicken breast from the walk-in cooler, but instead of taking it from the fresh stock they'd been using all evening, he pulled it from a container in the back, one that looked like it had been sitting there for days. The vegetables came from a similar source, not the fresh, organic produce the Golden Door proudly advertised, but pre-cut vegetables that looked wilted and tired. Daniel felt a prickle of concern, but he said nothing. He wasn't in charge of the kitchen, he just served what they gave him. But he made a mental note. Something wasn't right here. 10 minutes later, Andre slammed a plate onto the pass. "Chicken for the homeless guy. Get it out of my kitchen." Daniel picked up the plate carefully. It looked presentable enough. Golden brown chicken, vegetables arranged artfully, a garnish of fresh herbs on top, that almost covered the inferior quality underneath. But something about it felt wrong. The chicken looked dry. The vegetables looked limp despite the presentation. He carried the plate back to table 35, his concern growing. The man looked up as he approached, and his face brightened with that same genuine warmth. "That looks wonderful. Thank you so much." "You're very welcome, sir." Daniel set the plate down carefully. Please, let me know if you need anything at all. I'll be right over there.
Thank you.
You've been very kind. Daniel stepped back to give him privacy, but he didn't go far. From his position at the service station, he could observe the table while staying available. Most other tables had cleared out by now. Just a few stragglers finishing wine, signing checks, gathering belongings. The man at table 35 ate slowly, deliberately, like someone who'd learned not to take meals for granted. He cut his chicken into careful pieces, savored each bite. There was something almost poignant about the way he appreciated the meal, despite its questionable quality. It made Daniel wonder about his story. Where had he come from? Where was he going? What had brought him to the Golden Door at 9:45 on a Tuesday night, wearing worn clothes and carrying everything in a backpack? Grandma Rose had taught him never to make assumptions. Baby, you never know what someone's been through. That person on the street corner, that woman arguing with the cashier, that man who looks like he's given up on everything. They're all fighting battles you can't see. You show them kindness anyway. You show them respect, because one day you might need someone to do the same for you. About 15 minutes into the meal, something changed. The man put down his fork. He reached for his water glass and took a long drink, but his hand was shaking slightly. Then he put his hand to his throat. His face had gone pale, and a thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. Daniel was moving before he even registered the decision. Sir? Are you all right? The man shook his head, trying to speak, but the words came out in a rasp. Something's wrong. I don't feel. His eyes met Daniel's, and there was fear there. Real fear. Can't breathe right. And then he slumped forward, his head nearly hitting the table. Time seemed to slow down and speed up all at once. Daniel caught the man before he could fall completely, easing him back in his chair, and then carefully to the floor. The man's breathing was shallow, rapid. His skin had taken on a grayish color. Sweat covered his forehead. Someone call 911. Daniel shouted, his voice cutting through the quiet restaurant. The remaining diners turned to stare. One woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Roger came running from the direction of his office, his face a mixture of fury and fear. What happened? What did you do? Roger grabbed Daniel's shoulder roughly, trying to pull him away. He's sick. He needs an ambulance. Daniel shrugged off Roger's hand and knelt beside the man, loosening his collar to help him breathe. Sir? Can you hear me? Stay with me. Help is coming. The man's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Daniel with surprising clarity despite his obvious distress. Hurts, he whispered. Stomach. Can't breathe. You're going to be okay. Just stay still. The ambulance is coming. Brittany, one of the other servers, appeared with a phone pressed to her ear. They're on their way, they said. 5 to 7 minutes. Those minutes felt like hours. Daniel stayed beside the man, talking to him quietly, keeping him conscious and calm. He grabbed a clean napkin and dabbed the sweat from the man's forehead, held his hand when the man reached out, squeezing it weakly. Small gestures of comfort that came naturally to Daniel, even as chaos erupted around them. The other diners had stopped eating entirely, watching the drama unfold. Some were recording on their phones. Roger paced back and forth, running his hands through his thinning hair. This is a disaster. This is a complete disaster. If this gets out, if people think there's something wrong with our food. Roger was more concerned about the restaurant's reputation than the man who might be dying. Maybe you should be more concerned about him, Daniel said quietly, not looking up from the man on the floor. Don't you dare lecture me, Carter. This is your section, your table, your responsibility. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. 2 paramedics rushed in with their equipment, and Daniel reluctantly stepped back to give them room. They worked quickly, checking vitals, asking questions, starting an IV line. What did he eat? One paramedic asked. The roasted chicken special, Daniel said. He'd only had maybe a quarter of it when he started showing symptoms. Any known allergies? He didn't mention any to me. Any other medical conditions you're aware of? I don't know, sir. He just came in for dinner. They loaded the man onto a stretcher, working to stabilize him. As they prepared to wheel him out, one of the paramedics turned to Roger. Someone should come with us to the hospital. We'll need information, and he's in no condition to provide it. Roger looked around the room, his eyes calculating. Then they landed on Daniel. Carter served him. Carter can go. But Daniel was already moving. He grabbed his jacket from behind the service station. I'm coming. Which hospital? St. Mary's Medical Center. Wait, Carter, you're still on shift. Roger started. Daniel turned to face his manager, and something in his expression must have been fierce because Roger actually took a step back. That man might be seriously ill, from food we served him. I'm going to make sure he's okay. You can fire me if you want. I don't care, but I'm going. He followed the paramedics out, not waiting for Roger's response. At the hospital, the emergency room was a bright, sterile chaos. They wheeled the man directly back to a treatment room, while Daniel was directed to the waiting area. A tired administrator gave him a clipboard of forms. Fill out what you can. Leave blank what you don't know. Daniel did his best, but there was almost nothing he could provide. No name, no contact information, no medical history, no next of kin, just the bare facts. Arrived at restaurant at approximately 9:45, ordered roasted chicken, ate about a quarter of his meal before showing signs of severe distress. The man was listed as John Doe, unknown patient. Daniel sat in the hard plastic chairs of the waiting room, surrounded by other worried people. A mother with a feverish child, an elderly man holding his chest, a teenager with a badly swollen ankle, each person wrapped in their own crisis, their own fear. Time passed slowly, 1 hour, then 2. Daniel called the restaurant, but no one answered. They'd probably closed by now, everyone gone home. He should go home too. He'd done what he could, but something kept him in that chair, some sense that he couldn't just leave this man alone, unknown, with no one to care whether he lived or died. At 1:30 in the morning, a doctor finally emerged. She was in her 50s, with tired eyes and the weary bearing of someone who'd seen too much suffering. Are you here for our John Doe, the gentleman from the restaurant? Daniel stood quickly. Yes, ma'am. How is he? He's stable now, but it was touch and go for a while. It appears to be severe food poisoning, a particularly aggressive bacterial infection. The symptoms came on unusually fast, which suggests a high bacterial load in whatever he ingested. We've got him on IV antibiotics and fluids. He should recover, but he needs to stay for observation, at least 48 hours, possibly longer. Daniel felt relief wash over him, followed immediately by guilt. The food had come from his restaurant. He'd served it. Is there anything he needs? Anything I can do? The doctor looked at him curiously. You're not family. No, ma'am. I was his server. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. Something in the doctor's expression softened. That's kind of you. Most people wouldn't stay. He's going to need someone to cover his hospital bills until we can identify him and contact insurance or family. The social worker will be here in the morning to start that process, but for tonight, Daniel pulled out his wallet. He'd been saving for months, slowly building up an emergency fund. $843 in cash that he kept at home, plus another $600 in his checking account. It was supposed to be for rent, for food, for security. I can pay for tonight, he said, whatever the initial costs are, and I'll come back tomorrow to help figure out the rest. The doctor looked startled. You don't have to do that. You're not responsible. I know, but I want to help. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Talk to registration at the front desk, and she paused. The world needs more people like you. Daniel went to registration and arranged a deposit at the billing desk toward the patient's costs. It left him with less than $400 to his name. Rent was due in 12 days, but when he finally saw the man, John Doe, sleeping in a hospital bed, monitors beeping softly, oxygen flowing through a nasal cannula, Daniel felt at peace with his decision. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. The man looked more peaceful now than he had in the restaurant, though still obviously ill. I don't know if you can hear me, Daniel said softly, but you're going to be okay. The doctors are taking good care of you, and I'll come back tomorrow to check on you. You're not alone, sir. I promise you that. He stayed another hour, just sitting there, keeping watch. Around 3 in the morning, a nurse gently suggested he should go home and get some rest. We'll call you if there's any change, she said kindly. Daniel rode the bus home through the empty pre-dawn streets, exhausted but unable to rest. His mind kept replaying the evening, the way Roger and Andre had laughed about the homeless guy, the chicken pulled from the back of the cooler, the inferior vegetables, the man's face going pale. Something was very wrong at the Golden Door, and Daniel had a sinking feeling that he was about to pay the price for it. He fell into bed just as the sun was rising, too tired to even change out of his clothes. His phone rang 4 hours later. The call came from Roger at 9:30 in the morning. Daniel grabbed his phone groggily, still half asleep. "Carter, get down to the restaurant, now. We need to talk." "What's wrong?" "Just get here." Roger's voice was cold as ice. Daniel dressed quickly and took the bus across town. His stomach was in knots. When he arrived at the Golden Door, he found Roger waiting in the dining room with Chef Andre and 3 other servers. All of them looked angry. "Sit down, Carter." Daniel sat, feeling like he was facing a firing squad. "The health department showed up this morning," Roger said, pacing back and forth. "Apparently someone filed a report about food poisoning. They've launched an investigation. Do you know what this means? Do you have any idea what this could do to this restaurant?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Hammond, but that man really was sick. I saw him." "You saw him. You're the one who served him." Roger's face was turning purple. "The health inspector wants to know what he ate, when he ate it, who prepared it, who served it. Everything is pointing back to you, Carter." "But I just served the plate." "I didn't. Andre says he prepared that chicken exactly the same way he prepares every chicken. Perfect temperature, perfect timing, fresh ingredients. So if there was a problem, it must have happened after it left the kitchen." Roger leaned close, his breath hot on Daniel's face. "Did you do something to that food, Carter? Did you contaminate it somehow? Maybe you were angry about having to serve someone like that so late at night." "What? No, I would never." "Or maybe you dropped the plate and didn't tell anyone." One of the other servers chimed in. Brittany, who Daniel had thought was decent. "Maybe you picked it up off the floor and served it anyway." "I didn't do any of that." Daniel's voice rose. "I took the plate directly from the kitchen to the table. That's it." "Then why did that man get sick?" Roger demanded. "Why is the health department crawling all over my restaurant? Why is my reputation on the line?" "I don't know, but I'll tell you why. Because someone contaminated that food, and you're the only one who touched it after it left the kitchen." Roger straightened up. "You're suspended, effective immediately, pending the investigation. If the health department clears you, maybe we'll talk about you coming back. But until then, get out." "Mr. Hammond, please. I need this job. I can't afford." "Should have thought of that before you poisoned a customer." "I didn't poison anyone. Get out." Daniel looked around at the faces staring at him. Andre looked smug. Brittany wouldn't meet his eyes. The other servers just looked uncomfortable. No one spoke up for him. No one said a word in his defense. Jerome wasn't there. He was probably in the back, keeping his head down, too scared to get involved. Daniel stood slowly, feeling like he might be sick himself. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I didn't do anything wrong, but I understand you need someone to blame. I hope you find out the truth eventually." He walked out of the Golden Door, into the bright morning sun, with nothing but his dignity, and $400 to his name. Daniel returned to the hospital the next morning to check on John Doe. The man was awake but still very weak, his face pale against the white pillows. Daniel sat with him for an hour, bringing him water, adjusting his pillows, just being there in the quiet hospital room. The man was grateful but confused about why a stranger would help him like this. "You don't owe me anything," the man said, his voice hoarse and thin. "You've already done so much. You needed help." Daniel said simply, "That's enough." When the man tried to give Daniel money for the hospital bill, Daniel refused with a gentle shake of his head. "You keep that. You'll need it when you get out of here. This was partly my fault anyway. I served you that food. That wasn't your fault. Please let me." "No sir, just focus on getting better." The bill from the hospital arrived at Daniel's apartment the following afternoon. The initial charges he'd paid covered less than a third of the total. The remaining amount was over $1,500. Daniel stared at the number and felt his chest tighten. He had $390 in his account. Rent was $450, due in 10 days. He went to the unemployment office that same day. They told him suspended employees couldn't receive benefits until the investigation concluded. No timeline on how long that would take. The woman behind the desk barely looked at him as she delivered the news. Daniel spent the next morning applying for jobs. 15 applications, restaurants, hotels, catering companies, anywhere that might hire him. On every application the same question appeared: why did you leave your last position? He tried to be honest. Suspended pending investigation of food poisoning incident. It looked terrible no matter how he worded it. He tried softer language, tried explaining, tried leaving it vague. Nothing felt right. None of them called back. A few days later, Daniel walked past the golden door. Yellow tape stretched across the entrance like crime scene barriers. A notice from the health department was posted on the door, official, damning, impossible to miss. A woman he recognized, a regular customer who used to smile and chat with him, saw him from across the street. She quickly crossed to the other side to avoid him, her face turning away as if he carried some contagious shame. Word had apparently spread about who was responsible. His landlord, Mr. Ray, called that evening. "Daniel, I heard about what happened at the restaurant. I need to know, can you make rent this month?" Daniel looked around his tiny apartment. He'd been eating instant ramen for 3 days straight, the cheap kind that cost 30 cents a package. "I don't know, Mr. Ray, I'm trying to find work, but I like you, kid. You've always been a good tenant. Never loud, never trouble, always on time." Mr. Ray's voice was kind but firm. "But I got bills too. I can give you until the end of the month, but after that, I understand, thank you." The line went quiet for a moment, and Daniel could hear Mr. Ray breathing, could almost feel the man's discomfort through the phone. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am, I know. It's okay, I appreciate the extension." The text from Jerome came the next morning. "Man, I'm sorry. Roger's telling everyone you deliberately contaminated that food. Says you've always had an attitude problem, that you never fit in here. Some people are believing him. I wanted to speak up, but I got a family. I can't lose this job. I'm sorry." Daniel stared at the message for a long time before responding, "I understand. Take care of yourself." But it hurt. God, it hurt. Jerome had been the closest thing to a friend he had at the Golden Door. They'd worked side by side for 2 years, had shared complaints about Roger, had laughed about the ridiculous demands of entitled customers. And now Jerome couldn't even defend him. Daniel understood, he really did. A man with a family couldn't risk his job over principles, not in this economy. But understanding didn't make the abandonment sting any less. That Sunday, Daniel went to church, the same church Grandma Rose had attended for 40 years. He sat in the back, barely listening to the sermon, just seeking some kind of peace in the familiar ritual. The organ music washed over him, and he let his mind drift, remembering sitting beside his grandmother in these same pews. Afterward, Mrs. Patterson found him in the vestibule. She'd known his grandmother since they were girls, had been at the funeral, had held Daniel's hand during the burial. "Daniel Carter, I heard what they're saying about you." She grabbed his hands fiercely, her grip surprisingly strong for a woman in her 70s. "Don't you believe it for 1 second. Your grandmother raised you right. You wouldn't hurt anybody. This is just people looking for someone to blame. You keep your head up, you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am. You need anything, food, money, a place to stay, you call me. Don't you be proud now." Rose would want me to help her boy. It was the only kindness anyone had shown him all week. Daniel went home and cried for the first time since Grandma Rose died, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body, releasing weeks of grief and stress and fear that he'd been holding inside. The call came 2 days later from a detective. "Mr. Carter, this is Detective Sarah Mitchell with the City Health and Safety Division. I need to ask you some questions about the incident at the Golden Door." Daniel's heart sank into his stomach, but he agreed to come in that afternoon. Maybe this was it. Maybe they were going to arrest him after all. At the health department office, Detective Mitchell led him to a small interview room, gray walls, metal table, uncomfortable chairs. It looked exactly like the interrogation rooms on television. "Mr. Carter, I want to be clear. You're not under arrest. This is just an information-gathering interview. You can leave any time. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now tell me everything that happened that night." Daniel walked her through it all, his voice steady despite his nervousness. Arriving at work, Section C, and what it meant. The man coming in late, poorly dressed. Roger's visible disgust. Taking the order. Chef Andre pulling chicken from the back of the cooler, not the fresh stock from the front. The inferior vegetables, slightly wilted. Serving the meal. The man's collapse. The ambulance. The hospital, all of it. Detective Mitchell took extensive notes in a neat, precise hand. When Daniel mentioned Andre using old ingredients from the back of the cooler, her pen stopped moving. "You're certain about that? About where the chicken came from?" "Yes, ma'am. I noticed it at the time. It seemed odd, but I'm not in charge of the kitchen. I'm just a waiter. Did you see anyone else handle the food after Chef Andre prepared it? No ma'am, just Andre preparing it, and me taking it to the table. That's standard procedure. Detective Mitchell asked more questions about Roger, about the restaurant's practices, about Section C and how long it had been operating that way. Finally she sat back and looked at Daniel directly, her expression shifting from professional to almost sympathetic. Mr. Carter, we've been conducting a thorough investigation of the Golden Door. What we've found is extensive health code violations going back months, poor food storage practices, evidence of systematic cost-cutting measures that compromised food safety, and we found samples of the chicken from that night, still in the walk-in cooler. It tested positive for dangerous levels of salmonella bacteria because it had been improperly stored for over a week. Daniel felt relief and horror wash over him simultaneously, like two waves crashing together. You didn't do anything wrong, she said firmly, her voice taking on an edge of anger, but not at him. The contamination happened long before you touched that plate. We're building a case against Mr. Hammond and Chef Andre for criminal negligence. But I need to ask, do you know anything about deliberate food fraud? Using expired or inferior ingredients for certain customers? Daniel thought carefully, wanting to be honest but not wanting to overstate what he actually knew. I noticed that Section C, where they seat customers they don't consider important, sometimes got food that looked less fresh than what went to the main dining room. Vegetables that were a little older, cuts of meat that weren't quite as nice. But I can't prove anything. It was just something I observed. We're looking into that as well. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Carter. You've been very helpful. We'll be in touch. Detective, Daniel stood gathering his courage. The man who got sick, John Doe at St. Mary's Hospital, is he okay? I've been visiting him when I can, but Detective Mitchell's expression shifted to concern. He checked himself out 2 days ago, against medical advice, didn't leave any contact information or forwarding address. He what? But he was still recovering. We don't know where he went. His room was empty when the nurse came for morning rounds. He'd taken his clothes and just left. If he contacts you, please let us know immediately. We need his statement for the case. Daniel left feeling confused and worried. Why would the man leave like that? He'd been so weak, still needed medical care. Where had he gone? And why hadn't he told Daniel he was leaving? That night, Daniel counted his money again, spreading the bills out on his kitchen table. $273 left. Rent was due in 3 days. He couldn't pay it. Even if he skipped eating entirely, even if he turned off his phone, even if he did everything possible, he was still short by almost $200. He'd have to move out, but where would he go? He had no family except distant cousins in Ohio he hadn't spoken to in years. Mrs. Patterson's offer was kind, but he couldn't burden her. She lived on a fixed income herself. He sat in his apartment and thought seriously about leaving the city altogether. Taking a bus somewhere else, somewhere cheap, somewhere nobody knew his name or his story. Maybe he could start over in some small town where nobody had heard of the Golden Door, or food poisoning, or Daniel Carter the disgraced waiter. But Grandma Rose's voice stopped him, as clear as if she were sitting right there beside him. Character, baby. That's all you really own. Everything else can be taken away, but not who you are inside. Not unless you let them. He wouldn't run. He'd face whatever came next with dignity, the way she'd taught him. He'd hold his head up even when it hurt. The morning his rent was due, Daniel woke to someone knocking on his door. Not the tentative tap of a neighbor, or the brisk knock of a delivery person. This was loud, insistent, official sounding. He opened it to find a man in an expensive suit standing there, his shoes so polished they reflected the hallway light. Behind him, visible at the curb through the building's front entrance, was a sleek black town car with tinted windows. "Mr. Daniel Carter?" the man asked. "Yes, my name is Richard Blackwell, I'm an attorney." He handed Daniel a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. "I represent the gentleman who fell ill at the Golden Door 10 nights ago. He's recovered now, and he'd very much like to speak with you. He asked me to bring you to meet with him. Would you be willing to come?" Daniel stared at the man, then at the expensive car, trying to process what was happening. The man from the hospital, John Doe, had an attorney. A lawyer who drove a car that probably cost more than Daniel made in 5 years. Yes, I'll come. Just let me change into something more presentable. Take your time, Mr. Carter, I'll wait here. Daniel went back inside, his mind racing with questions. He put on his best clothes, the same dress pants and button-down shirt he'd worn to the police station, his one good tie that Grandma Rose had given him for his high school graduation. As he dressed, his hands shaking slightly, 1,000 questions flooded his mind. Who was this man really? Why had he left the hospital so suddenly? Why did he have an attorney and a driver? And why, after disappearing without a word, did he want to see Daniel now? Daniel looked at himself in the mirror, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath. Character, baby, he whispered to his reflection. That's all you really own. Then he walked out to meet whatever was waiting for him in that black car. The ride across the city was surreal. Daniel sat in the back of the town car, watching familiar streets pass by through tinted windows. Mr. Blackwell made polite small talk, but revealed nothing about where they were going, or who they were meeting. They pulled up in front of a beautiful brownstone, in one of the city's most expensive neighborhoods. Daniel's confusion only deepened. This way please, Mr. Blackwell said, leading him up the steps to a black door with brass fixtures. A small plaque read, Blackwell and Associates Private Law Practice. Inside was even more intimidating. Dark wood paneling, expensive art, leather furniture that probably cost more than Daniel made in a year. They walked down a hallway to a large office at the back. Mr. Blackwell knocked once, then opened the door. Mr. Carter is here, sir. Send him in. Thank you, Richard. Daniel stepped inside, and stopped short. Two men stood waiting. One was Richard Blackwell's age, distinguished looking in a three-piece suit. The other was the man from the restaurant, John Doe. But he looked completely different. Gone were the worn jacket and unkempt hair. The man wore an expensive suit, his gray hair neatly styled. He stood straight and confident. His eyes held the same kindness Daniel remembered, but now there was something else there too: authority, intelligence, the bearing of someone used to being in charge. Mr. Carter, the man said, stepping forward with a warm smile. Please come in. Sit down. I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude, and I owe you an explanation. Daniel sat slowly in one of the leather chairs, feeling like he'd walked into an alternate reality. I'm sorry, Daniel said. I don't understand. Who are you? The man settled into the chair beside Daniel rather than behind the desk. My name is James William, Jim, and I own the Golden Door, along with 16 other restaurants across the country. Daniel felt the words hit him like a physical blow. You what? I own the restaurant where you work. Where you worked? Jim's expression grew serious. I need to tell you a story, Daniel. About 3 months ago, I received an anonymous letter. Someone who worked at the Golden Door, I still don't know who, wrote to tell me that things were happening at my restaurant that I needed to know about. Discrimination, possible fraud, customers being mistreated based on their appearance. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street. I've owned restaurants for 40 years, started with a little diner in Cleveland, worked my way up. I've learned that when someone takes the risk to write a letter like that, you pay attention. So I decided to investigate personally, to see what was really happening when the owner wasn't watching. The disguise, Daniel said slowly, understanding dawning. The worn clothes, the backpack, that was all, deliberate. Yes, Jim turned back to face him. I wanted to see how my restaurant treated people who didn't look wealthy, people who didn't fit the image of what a Golden Door customer should be. I picked a late hour on purpose, dressed in a way that would make me seem undesirable. I wanted to see the truth. Richard Blackwell pulled out a thick folder from his desk. What Mr. William witnessed that night confirmed his worst fears. And what happened after, your kindness, your integrity, and then being scapegoated, that revealed even more. After I got sick, and the health department got involved, everything came to light, Jim continued. We've spent the last 10 days conducting a comprehensive investigation. Financial records, supplier invoices, interviews with current and former staff. What we've found is a systematic pattern of fraud, health code violations, and workplace discrimination. Richard opened the folder. Roger Hammond and Chef Andre have been running a fraudulent operation for at least 3 years. They've been purchasing cheap, often expired ingredients and substituting them for the premium products the restaurant actually pays for, then pocketing the difference. We estimate approximately $200,000 over 3 years. But it's worse than that, Jim said, his voice hard. They were specifically using the cheapest, lowest quality food for Section C, for customers they deemed less important. People who didn't look wealthy enough, who weren't white enough, who didn't fit their idea of what the Golden Door's clientele should be. They were literally serving expired food to certain customers to maximize their profit. Daniel felt sick. All those people he'd served over 3 years, thinking they were getting what they paid for. That chicken that made me sick, Jim continued. It had been stored improperly for over 10 days. The bacterial load was so high, it caused rapid onset symptoms. I could have died, Daniel. And it wasn't an accident, it was the result of years of deliberate cost-cutting and fraud. We've also documented at least 12 instances in the past 2 years where customers complained of food poisoning from the Golden Door, Richard added. Hammond paid them off quietly, a few $100s each, just enough to keep them from filing reports or leaving bad reviews. He hid it all from Mr. William using a separate cash fund. Jim sat back down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. But here's what matters most, Daniel. In the middle of all that corruption, all that cruelty, I found you. I watched how you treated me that night, with kindness, with respect. You made an honest recommendation based on what you actually thought was good, not what was most expensive. You were patient and professional, even though I showed up right before closing. And then when I got sick, Jim's voice grew thick with emotion. You didn't just call an ambulance and walk away. You insisted on coming to the hospital. You stayed with me for hours. You paid part of my hospital bill when you thought I was some homeless person with no money or insurance. You visited me every day while I was there, even though you were suspended, even though you were being blamed for what happened. I saw you, Daniel, Jim said, looking directly into his eyes. I saw you refuse when I tried to pay you back, because you thought I couldn't afford it. I heard you tell the nurses you'd help figure out the rest of the bills. I watched you sit beside my bed when you thought I was asleep, just to make sure I wasn't alone. Daniel's throat was tight. You were awake? Not always, but enough to see who you really are. Richard spoke up. Mr. Carter, Hammond and Andre have been terminated. They're facing criminal charges for fraud, health code violations, and reckless endangerment. The DA is building a case. Several other employees who were complicit have also been let go. The Golden Door is closed for renovations, Jim said. Complete overhaul, new equipment, new systems, new standards. We're rebuilding it the right way, and I need someone to lead that effort. Someone who understands what hospitality really means. Someone with integrity who won't compromise on doing right by people. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I'd like that person to be you, Daniel. Daniel couldn't speak. He was sure he'd misheard. I'm offering you the position of general manager of the Golden Door. You'll start as interim manager under my mentorship. If all goes well, the role becomes permanent. Jim said clearly. Starting salary of $75,000 per year, full benefits, profit sharing once we're operational again, complete authority to hire your team, set your standards, build the culture you think a restaurant should have. $75,000. Daniel had been making $32,000. This was more than double. This was impossible. This couldn't be real. But I don't have management experience, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've only ever been a server. You have something more valuable than experience, Jim said firmly. You have character. You have integrity. You have the respect of people who matter. Jerome, the line cook, when I interviewed him, he said you were the only person in that entire restaurant who treated everyone with equal respect, that you helped people, covered shifts, trained new employees even though it wasn't your job. That's leadership, Daniel. Experience can be taught, Richard added, character can't. Mr. William will mentor you personally. We'll provide comprehensive management training. You'll have full support. Why me? Daniel asked, his voice breaking. You could hire anyone, someone qualified, someone who knows what they're doing. Because I've spent 40 years in this business, Jim said. I've hired plenty of qualified managers. I've worked with people who had impressive resumes and perfect credentials. Some of them turned out to be Roger Hammond, corrupt, cruel, more interested in profit than people. You know what I haven't seen enough of? People who do the right thing when it costs them something. People who show kindness to strangers. People who stay true to their values even when the world is trying to break them. Jim stood and extended his hand. You've been through hell these past 10 days. You were suspended, blamed, abandoned by people who should have stood up for you. You lost your income, nearly lost your home, but you know what you didn't lose? Your integrity, your compassion, your willingness to help someone in need even when you had nothing to spare. Daniel stood slowly, his legs unsteady. That's what I need leading my restaurant, Jim said. Not someone who knows how to maximize profit or cut corners. Someone who knows how to treat people with dignity. Someone who understands that hospitality isn't about fancy food or elegant decor. It's about making every single person who walks through your door feel valued. Daniel looked at Jim's extended hand, then at Richard, who was smiling warmly, then back at Jim's face, which held nothing but sincerity and respect. He thought about Grandma Rose, about her 3 jobs and her tired hands and her constant lessons about character, about how she'd always told him that doing the right thing mattered, even when it seemed like nobody was watching, even when it cost you something. She'd been right, someone had been watching, and it had mattered. I accept, Daniel said, his voice stronger now. He shook Jim's hand. I'd be honored to accept. Jim's face broke into a wide smile. He pulled Daniel into a brief firm hug. Welcome aboard, partner. Now let's rebuild the Golden Door and make it into what it should have been all along. The next morning, Daniel met Jim at the Golden Door at 7 a.m. The restaurant was still closed, but contractors were already at work. The sounds of hammering, drilling and voices calling to each other filled the space. Coffee. Jim handed him a cup from the diner next door. Thank you. Daniel took a sip, looking around at the organized chaos. First things first, Jim said, pulling out a folder. I need to be honest with you about what you're walking into. This isn't going to be easy. We have 4 weeks to completely overhaul this restaurant. Deep clean, new equipment, new systems, new staff. The health department has given us a list of 53 violations that must be corrected before we can reopen. 53. Hammond and Andre let this place fall apart, while pocketing the money that should have gone to maintenance and quality ingredients. Every shortcut they could take, they took. Jim opened the folder, showing Daniel inspection reports, failed temperature controls, expired food, pest issues, broken equipment. It's extensive. Daniel read through the reports, his jaw tightening. All those customers, all those people who trusted us. That's why we're fixing it, completely, no half measures. Jim led him through the restaurant, pointing out what was being done. New walk-in cooler with backup temperature monitoring, complete kitchen renovation, updated ventilation, professional deep cleaning of every surface. It's going to cost about $200,000 to do it right. That's a lot of money. It's the cost of doing business with integrity, Jim said. I should have been paying closer attention. This is partly my fault, but we're going to fix it now, and it's never going to happen again. They walked through the dining room, which looked strange with half the furniture removed, drop cloths covering the floors. I also need to talk to you about the staff situation, Jim said, his expression serious. We're down to about half our original team. Some were let go for being part of the fraud. Others quit when the restaurant closed. We'll need to rebuild almost from scratch. What about Jerome? Daniel asked. And the others who stayed? Jerome's staying definitely. I've already told him he's promoted to sous chef with a significant raise. There are a few others, servers, a bartender, some kitchen staff, who seem solid. But we need to interview everyone, make sure they're aligned with the new culture we're building. When do we start interviews? Today, this afternoon. I want you to lead them. Daniel felt a flutter of nervousness. Me? But you're the owner, you should. You're the general manager. Jim said firmly, this is your team to build. I'll sit and provide guidance, but the decisions are yours. You need to hire people you can trust, people who share your values. Jim pulled out another folder, this one full of job applications. We've already received over 100 applications since word got out about the management change. Apparently, people want to work for a restaurant that does things right. He handed the folder to Daniel. Your job is to find the best ones, not the most experienced necessarily, the ones with character. Daniel opened the folder, looking at application after application. His first major decision as a manager. What if I make mistakes? He asked. You will, Jim said. We all do, but I trust your judgment, Daniel. You have good instincts about people. Trust those instincts. That afternoon, Daniel conducted his first interviews. Jim sat beside him, observing but letting Daniel take the lead. The first applicant was a young woman named Alicia Martinez, 23 years old, currently working at a fast food restaurant while attending community college. No fine dining experience. Why do you want to work here? Daniel asked. Honestly, I need a better paying job to finish school, Alicia said. But also, I read the article in the paper about what happened here. About how the old management was discriminating against people, serving them bad food. My mom's a housekeeper. She works in fancy houses, and sometimes the people there treat her like she's invisible, like she doesn't matter. I want to work somewhere that doesn't do that to people. Daniel saw something in her eyes, determination, pride, a refusal to accept that some people mattered less than others. What would you do if you saw someone being treated unfairly? Daniel asked. I'd say something, Alicia said without hesitation. My mom always taught me, if you see wrong and you don't speak up, you're part of the problem. Daniel looked at Jim, who gave a small nod. When can you start? Daniel asked. You're hiring me. Alicia's face lit up. Really, really, we'll train you on fine dining service, but your attitude, that's exactly what we need here. They interviewed 15 people that day. Some had impressive resumes but something off in their answers, too focused on prestige, on working at a high-end establishment, on the kind of clientele they'd serve. Daniel passed on those. Others, like Alicia, had less experience but the right heart. A line cook who'd been fired from his last job for refusing to use expired ingredients. A server who'd left a restaurant because the manager was sexually harassing staff. A bartender who'd taken a stand against serving obviously intoxicated customers. People who'd paid a price for doing the right thing. People who understood that character mattered more than shortcuts. By the end of the week, Daniel had hired 12 new staff members. Combined with the 8 who'd stayed from before, they had a team. But hiring them was just the beginning. The second week was about training, both for the new staff and for Daniel himself. Jim brought in Chef Maria Santos to be the new executive chef. She was in her 50s, trained in Mexico City, with 30 years of experience in top restaurants. She was tough but fair, demanding but patient. The kitchen is the heart of the restaurant, she told the assembled kitchen staff on her first day. If the heart is rotten, everything else fails. We're going to run a clean kitchen, a safe kitchen, a kitchen where quality is never compromised, ever. She walked through the new equipment, explaining standards and expectations. I don't yell, I don't throw things, I don't create drama, she said, but I also don't accept excuses. If you're not sure about something, you ask. If you see something wrong, you speak up. We're a team, and we succeed or fail together. Jerome flourished under her guidance. For the first time in years, he stood tall in the kitchen, no longer afraid to voice concerns or suggestions. Chef Maria, should we use the lemon zest on the fish or serve it on the side? What do you think, Jerome? I think on the side gives the customer more control over their flavor profile. Good thinking. Let's do that. While Maria rebuilt the kitchen culture, Daniel worked on the front of house. He redesigned the entire section system, eliminating Section C entirely. There are no bad sections here, he told the servers. Every table is a good table. Every customer deserves the same level of service. We rotate sections so everyone has equal opportunity for good tips and good tables. He implemented new training protocols. Role-playing exercises where servers practiced handling difficult situations, scripts for how to graciously handle dietary restrictions, customer complaints, special requests. But more than that, he focused on mindset. I want you to practice something, he told them at a training session. Every time a customer walks in, I want you to imagine they're going through something hard. Maybe they just lost a job. Maybe they're celebrating their last cancer treatment. Maybe they're on a first date and terrified. Maybe they just need one good thing to happen today. He paused, looking at each face. We don't know their story, but we can give them one good experience. One moment where they feel valued, respected, cared for. That's our job. Not just bringing food to tables, making people feel like they matter. Alicia raised her hand. What if they're rude? What if they treat us badly? Then you still treat them with respect, Daniel said. Not because they deserve it, but because you're a professional, because that's who you are. But you also don't tolerate abuse. There's a difference between patience with a difficult customer and accepting mistreatment. We'll work together to figure out where that line is. During the third week, Daniel faced his first real test as a manager. One of the kitchen staff, a prep cook named Marcus, wasn't working out. He was consistently late, his work was sloppy, and he'd been rude to other staff members. Jim pulled Daniel aside. You need to deal with Marcus. I know, I've been trying to give him chances to improve. How many chances? This would be his fourth. Daniel, being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. One of the hardest parts of leadership is knowing when someone isn't right for the team. Marcus is bringing everyone else down. What does that do to morale, to quality? Daniel knew Jim was right, but the idea of firing someone, of taking away their income, made his stomach turn. What if he needs this job? What if he's struggling with something? Then you have a conversation with him, Jim said. You find out what's going on. You offer help if you can, but you can't sacrifice the whole team for one person who isn't pulling their weight. That's not fair to everyone else who's working hard and following the rules. That afternoon, Daniel called Marcus into the office. Marcus, we need to talk about your performance. Yeah, I know. I've been late a few times. I'll do better. It's more than that. You've been late 9 times in 2 weeks. Your prep work has been incomplete. Chef Maria has had to redo your station 3 times. And yesterday, Alicia said you made an inappropriate comment to her. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. It was just a joke. She didn't find it funny, neither do I. Daniel leaned forward. Marcus, is something going on? Is there something outside of work that's affecting your ability to do this job? For a moment Marcus looked like he might open up. Then he shrugged. I'm fine, just adjusting to the new place. We've given you 3 weeks and multiple warnings. I need to know, can you commit to meeting our standards, being on time, doing quality work, treating everyone with respect? Yeah, sure, whatever. That casual whatever decided it. I'm sorry, Marcus, but this isn't working out. Today will be your last day. We'll pay you through the end of the week, and I'll provide a neutral reference if you need one. You're firing me? Seriously? Yes. I'm sorry, but yes. Marcus stood up, angry. This is bullshit. You're going to regret this. After he left, Daniel sat alone in the office, feeling sick. Had he done the right thing? Had he given Marcus enough chances? Jim came in a few minutes later. How did it go? I fired him, but I feel terrible about it. Did you give him chances to improve? Multiple chances. Did you explain clearly what needed to change? Yes. Did he make those changes? No. Then you did the right thing, Jim said gently. Leadership isn't about being liked, Daniel. It's about doing what's best for the team, even when it's hard. Marcus made choices that left you with no other option. The next day, Chef Maria pulled Daniel aside. I heard about Marcus. Thank you. You're thanking me. He was a problem. Everyone knew it. We were all waiting to see if you'd actually do something about it, or just let it slide. You did the right thing, and now everyone knows you mean what you say about standards. That matters. Daniel learned something important that day. Kindness wasn't the same as weakness. You could be compassionate, and still hold people accountable. You could care about people, and still enforce boundaries. It was a lesson he'd need to remember. On day 27, 3 days before the scheduled reopening, Daniel stood in the completely transformed restaurant, and felt a mix of pride and terror. The dining room gleamed. Fresh paint in warm tones. New carpet, updated lighting that made everything feel welcoming, rather than intimidating. The kitchen sparkled with new equipment, and spotless surfaces. But more importantly, the staff was ready. They'd trained intensively for 3 weeks. They knew the menu inside and out. They'd practiced service scenarios until they could handle anything. Tomorrow we do a soft opening, Jim announced at the final staff meeting. Family and friends only. 50 reservations, a chance to work out any kinks before the grand reopening on Friday. He looked around at the assembled team. 3 weeks ago, this restaurant was a symbol of everything wrong with our industry: discrimination, fraud, cutting corners, treating people like they don't matter. But you, all of you, you've rebuilt it into something better, something real, something we can be proud of. Jim gestured to Daniel. Your manager has one more thing to say. Daniel stood, his heart pounding. Public speaking still terrified him. I just want to say thank you, he began. 3 weeks ago I was at the lowest point of my life. I thought my career was over. I thought I'd lost everything. But Mr. William gave me a second chance. And you all chose to be part of this team, part of this vision. He looked at each face. Jerome, Alicia, Maria, all the others. We're not just reopening a restaurant. We're proving that you can run a business with integrity, that you can succeed without compromising your values, that kindness and quality can go together. Tomorrow we show the world what that looks like. The soft opening the next night wasn't perfect. There were small hiccups, an order that came out in the wrong sequence, a wine recommendation that didn't quite match the dish. But the energy was right, the warmth was real, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. This doesn't feel like the Golden Door, one longtime customer said. It feels better, more welcoming, like you actually want us here. That, Daniel said, is exactly what we're going for. Friday arrived, the grand reopening. Daniel stood at the entrance in his suit, watching the first customers arrive, and felt Grandma Rose's presence like a hand on his shoulder. Keep your head up, and your heart clean, baby. He had. And look what had happened. The door opened and Daniel smiled. Good evening. Welcome to the Golden Door. The first 2 weeks after the grand reopening exceeded every expectation. The reservation book stayed full, sometimes 2 weeks out. Reviews poured in, 4.8 stars average. Local food bloggers praised both the food quality and the atmosphere. Word spread that the Golden Door had truly changed. But not everyone was happy about it. It started with phone calls. Anonymous at first. The Golden Door used to be exclusive. Now you let in anyone. Your dress code is ridiculous. This is a fine dining establishment, not a diner. I'm taking my business elsewhere. You've lost what made this place special. Daniel handled each call with patience and professionalism. We appreciate your feedback. Our goal is to provide exceptional food and service to everyone who walks through our door. If that doesn't align with what you're looking for, we understand. Then came the online reviews. 1-star ratings from people who admitted they hadn't actually visited the new restaurant. Used to be my favorite restaurant. Now it's changed completely, lost its sophistication, lowered their standards to appeal to the masses. What a shame. The coded language was obvious to anyone paying attention. Daniel tried not to let it affect him, but it stung. Ignore them, Jim said when he found Daniel reading reviews late one night. Look at the actual numbers. Revenue is up. Customer satisfaction from people who actually eat here is through the roof. These are people angry that they can't use this restaurant to feel superior to others anymore. That's not our problem. Jim was right. For every negative review from someone who'd never visited, there were 5 glowing reviews from actual customers. Finally, a fine dining restaurant, where I don't feel judged for my clothes. The food is incredible, but what really stands out is how the staff treats everyone, from the couple clearly on a first date to the family with loud kids to the elderly man dining alone. Everyone matters here. This is what every restaurant should be. But the real confrontation came on a Saturday night, 3 weeks after reopening. The dining room was packed, humming with conversation and laughter. Daniel was checking on a table near the window when he noticed a commotion at the entrance. 6 people had arrived without a reservation. David, the young host Daniel had trained personally, was handling it with professional courtesy. I apologize, but we're fully booked this evening. I'd be happy to add you to our wait list. We should have a table available in about 40 minutes. Or I can make a reservation for you for later this week. That's unacceptable. The speaker was a heavy-set man in his 60s, wearing an expensive suit that screamed old money. His face was red with indignation. Do you know who I am? I've been coming to the Golden Door for 15 years. I don't wait for tables. I understand, sir, but get me your manager. Now Daniel moved toward them, his expression calm despite the adrenaline starting to pump through his veins. Every eye in the nearby tables had turned to watch. "Good evening, sir. I'm Daniel Carter, the general manager. How can I help you?" The man looked Daniel up and down, and something ugly twisted his features. Recognition, contempt, and barely concealed racism all flashed across his face in rapid succession. "You're the manager." He said it like the words physically hurt him. "Where's Roger Hammond?" "Mr. Hammond is no longer with the Golden Door. I'd be happy to assist you with this. Is outrageous." The man's voice rose deliberately loud enough to carry across the dining room. "Roger would never have treated me like this." Roger understood loyalty. Roger knew that some customers are more important than others, that tradition and standards matter. Daniel felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant on them. This wasn't just about a table, this was a test of him, of the new Golden Door, of everything they'd been building. "At the Golden Door all customers are equally important, sir," Daniel said clearly, making sure his voice carried too. "Everyone who walks through our door deserves the same excellent service, whether they're first-time visitors or have been coming here for years. We have a table that should be available in 35 to 40 minutes. You're welcome to wait at the bar, and your first round of drinks will be complimentary, or I'd be happy to make you a reservation for another evening this week." "I'm not waiting at the bar like some walk-in off the street," the man spat. "I am Philip Patterson. I sit on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. I play golf with the mayor. I know people, important people who can make or break establishments like this." He stepped closer to Daniel, invading his space aggressively. "And I will make sure everyone in this city knows that the Golden Door has completely lowered its standards, that it's letting in just anyone now, that it's being run by someone who clearly doesn't understand what this restaurant is supposed to be." The words "someone like you" hung unspoken in the air, but everyone heard them anyway. Daniel felt his heart pounding, but he kept his voice steady and professional. "Mr. Patterson, I understand you're frustrated, but I need you to lower your voice. You're disturbing our other guests. I'll do whatever I want. This is America. I have rights. You can't tell me what to do." "You do have rights, sir, and so do the other 90 people dining here tonight. They have the right to enjoy their meal in peace. I've offered you several reasonable options." "Reasonable? You call making me wait reasonable? Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, sir, you've told me 3 times now." Daniel kept his tone respectful but firm. "And it doesn't change my answer. We have a reservation system that we honor for everyone. No exceptions based on who someone is or how much money they have or who they know." Patterson's face went from red to purple. "You arrogant little—" "I want to speak to the owner. Get him out here right now. Is there a problem?" The voice came from behind Daniel. Jim William had emerged from the back office, where he'd clearly been watching the whole exchange on the security cameras. He looked calm, almost casual, but his eyes were hard as steel. Patterson's entire demeanor changed instantly. His face went from rage to relief. "Jim, thank God, your manager here is being completely unreasonable. I just want a table, a simple table at a restaurant I've been patronizing for 15, and he's refusing to seat me. This is not how the Golden Door operates. This is not the standard you built." Jim walked slowly to stand beside Daniel, not in front of him, beside him, a gesture of support that everyone in the restaurant noticed. "Mr. Patterson," Jim said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent dining room, "I heard the entire conversation. I've been watching from my office. My manager offered you multiple reasonable options, all of which you refused, and then you made personal attacks on him, and implied that your social connections should exempt you from the same policies that apply to everyone else." "I didn't." "You're misunderstanding." "I'm not misunderstanding anything." Jim's voice grew harder. "I've known you for 8 years, Philip. You've spent a lot of money at this restaurant. You've brought business associates here. You've recommended us to your friends, and I appreciate all of that. I really do." He paused, and the silence stretched. "But none of that gives you the right to treat my staff with disrespect. None of that exempts you from basic courtesy, and none of that means you can use racist implications to intimidate my general manager." "I never said anything racist. You're putting words in my—" "You didn't have to say it explicitly." Jim cut him off. "We all heard what you meant. Everyone in this room heard it." Patterson looked around at the faces watching: customers, staff, his own companions who were clearly embarrassed. He seemed to realize he'd miscalculated badly. Jim, we've been friends for years. Surely you're not going to take his word over mine. This isn't about taking anyone's word, Jim said firmly. I saw everything on camera. I heard everything. And based on what I witnessed, you are no longer welcome at the Golden Door. You're banned from this establishment, effective immediately. Please leave now, or I'll call the police for trespassing. You can't be serious. Patterson's voice rose to a near shriek. Do you know what this will do to your business? I will tell everyone, about this. I'll ruin you. Then I'll be ruined, Jim said calmly, but I'll be ruined standing up for what's right. My manager did nothing wrong. He offered you professional service and fair treatment. You chose to respond with entitlement and disrespect. Those are the consequences of your choices, not his. He pulled his phone from his pocket. You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police. Your choice. Patterson stood there trembling with rage, looking around one more time for support. His companions were already edging toward the door, clearly wanting no part of this. You'll regret this, William. Both of you. I promise you that. Maybe, Jim said, but I'll sleep fine tonight. Can you say the same? Patterson turned and stormed out, his group following reluctantly behind. The door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. For a beat the entire restaurant was completely silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. Then someone started clapping. It was a woman at table 12, in her 70s, wearing a simple dress and cardigan. She stood up as she applauded, her face fierce with approval. Another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds the entire dining room was on their feet, applauding, not polite golf claps, but sustained enthusiastic applause. Some people were actually cheering. A young couple at table 8 was whooping. The family with 3 kids at table 15 started chanting Daniel, Daniel, which made their children dissolve into giggles. Daniel felt his eyes sting with tears he couldn't let fall. Not here, not now. But the overwhelming support from this room full of strangers, people who'd witnessed what happened and chosen to stand up for what was right, it broke something open inside him. Jim turned to Daniel and extended his hand. Daniel shook it, and Jim pulled him into a brief firm hug. You handled that perfectly, Jim said quietly, just for Daniel's ears. Better than I could have. I'm proud of you. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. Jim turned to address the room, raising his hands to quiet the applause. Thank you all for your patience and understanding, he said. We're sorry for the disturbance. Please enjoy your meals. Everything is on the house tonight, our way of apologizing for the disruption. This brought another round of applause, and gradually the dining room returned to its normal hum of conversation. But the energy had changed. There was something warmer now, something more connected. These strangers had witnessed injustice and chosen to stand against it. They'd become for that moment a community. Later that night, after the last customer had left and the staff was cleaning up, Daniel sat in the office with Jim. He's going to cause trouble, Daniel said. Real trouble. He meant what he said about telling people. I know. Jim leaned back in his chair. Philip Patterson sits on multiple boards. He's connected to half the wealthy families in this city. He can make things difficult for us. I should have handled it better. Maybe if I'd been more diplomatic. Stop, Jim said firmly. You handled it exactly right. With professionalism, respect, and clear boundaries. That man chose to make it ugly. That's on him, not you. But if we lose business because of this, then we lose business, Jim said. But Daniel, listen to me. Did you see that room tonight? Those 90 people who stood up and applauded, those are our customers. The ones who believe in what we're doing. The ones who want a restaurant that treats everyone with dignity. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Philip Patterson and his crowd. They want exclusivity for the sake of exclusivity. They want a place that makes them feel superior to other people. That's not what the Golden Door is anymore. And if standing up for our values costs us customers like that, then good riddance. You really mean that? I really mean that. Jim turned to face him. My father was a janitor. My mother cleaned houses. I worked my way up from washing dishes. I built this business to create places where people feel welcomed, not judged. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way. But you reminded me what matters. He paused. Patterson can tell whoever he wants about what happened tonight. Let him. Because you know what else he'll be telling them. That we stood up for our employee. that we enforced our values even when it was costly, that we chose integrity over profit. Some people will see that as a weakness, but the people who matter, the ones who'll become our loyal customers, they'll see it as a strength. Daniel wanted to believe him, but he'd seen how much power people like Patterson wielded. What if he really can ruin us? Then we'll start over, Jim said simply. But I don't think that's going to happen. You want to know why? Why? Because I've been in this business for 40 years and I've learned something important. At the end of the day, word of mouth is everything. And after tonight, 90 people are going home with a story about a restaurant that stood up for what's right. They're going to tell their friends, their families, their co-workers. That's worth more than anything Philip Patterson can say. Jim was right. Over the next few days they did lose some customers. Several reservation cancellations came in from people with connections to Patterson. Negative reviews appeared online, all from Patterson's social circle. But something else happened too. New reservations flooded in. People who'd heard about the confrontation through word of mouth, through social media, through the local news that had picked up the story, and wanted to support the restaurant that had stood up for equality and respect. The food blogger who'd been covering their story wrote a piece titled "The Golden Door Shows How to Handle Discrimination with Grace and Conviction." A local news station did a segment on restaurants fighting back against exclusivity. And on the restaurant's social media, hundreds of comments poured in. Finally, a restaurant with a spine. Just made a reservation for Saturday. Can't wait to support you. This is what leadership looks like. Within a week they were booked solid 3 weeks out. Patterson had tried to ruin them. Instead he'd made them stronger. 3 days after the Patterson incident, a woman Daniel didn't recognize was waiting when he arrived at work. She was in her late 20s, carrying a messenger bag and a notebook, looking determined but professional. "Mr. Carter, my name is Jennifer Palmer. I'm a reporter with the Tribune. Could I have a few minutes of your time?" Daniel's first instinct was caution. "I don't do interviews. Everything about the restaurant should go through Mr. William." "I'm not here about the restaurant," she interrupted gently. "Well, not just about the restaurant. I'm here about a much bigger story, and I think you're at the center of it. Please, just 5 minutes. If you're not interested after that, I'll leave. No pressure." Something in her earnest expression made him agree. 5 minutes. Come inside. They sat at the bar. Jennifer pulled out her notebook and Daniel could see it was filled with handwritten notes, highlighted sections, printouts of documents. "I've been investigating Roger Hammond for the past 2 months," she said without preamble. "Your story, the undercover investigation, the food fraud, what happened to you, that got my attention initially. But when I started digging into Hammond's background, I found something much bigger." She slid several documents across the bar. "Roger Hammond has been doing this for over 20 years, not just here. Before the Golden Door he managed 4 other upscale restaurants in 3 different cities, and at every single one there's a pattern. Discrimination against staff, particularly employees of color, financial irregularities, health code violations, toxic workplace culture." Daniel looked at the documents, employment records, complaint letters, health department reports from restaurants in Cleveland, Denver, and 2 here in the city. At the Sterling Club in Cleveland, he was there for 3 years. 5 different employees filed formal complaints about racial discrimination and hostile work environment. But they were all settled quietly, confidential settlements, NDAs, complaints withdrawn. Hammond was eventually forced out, but it was all handled behind closed doors. She pulled out another file. Then Denver, Les Chateau. Same pattern, discrimination, food quality issues covered up. 2 servers who filed EEOC complaints, both settled confidentially. Hammond moved on to the next city with a clean record because no one talked. "How many people?" Daniel asked quietly. "That I can confirm through documents. 21 employees across 5 restaurants who filed formal complaints about discrimination or harassment. But I've interviewed over 40 former employees total. Many were too scared to file official complaints. Some signed NDAs and can't talk on the record, but they all tell the same story." Jennifer's expression was intense. "And then there's the health violations. I've documented at least 15 cases of customers who got seriously ill from food poisoning at restaurants Hammond managed over the past 15 years. Most were paid off quietly, a few $100s here, 1,000 there. Just enough to keep them from filing health department complaints or leaving public reviews." Daniel felt sick. All those people, all those years, Why are you telling me all this? Because I'm writing an investigative piece, Jennifer said, about how people like Roger Hammond move through the restaurant industry, leaving destruction in their wake, protected by confidential settlements, by NDAs, by an industry culture that prioritizes reputation over accountability. About how the system enables abusers to just move to the next city, the next restaurant, and start the whole cycle over with a clean slate. She leaned forward. But I don't just want to write about what went wrong. I want to write about what it looks like when someone finally does it right. Jim William could have handled this quietly like everyone else did. Paid you off, moved Hammond to another location, buried it. But he didn't. He exposed it. He held people accountable. He promoted you instead of scapegoating you. And that makes me what? Some kind of hero. Daniel shook his head. I'm not. I just did my job. You did more than that, Jennifer said firmly. You maintained your integrity through 3 years of discrimination. You helped a stranger at personal cost when you thought he was homeless. You refused payment because you thought he couldn't afford it. You visited him every day in the hospital. You paid part of his bill when you were suspended and nearly broke yourself. She pulled out one more document. And when you were given power, when you became the manager, you used it to build something better, to create a culture based on respect and dignity. You didn't become what hurt you. That matters, Mr. Carter. That's the story that needs to be told. Daniel looked at the documents spread across the bar. At 21 confirmed complaints, at 40 interviews, at 15 cases of people getting sick. He thought about Grandma Rose, about her teaching him to do the right thing even when it was hard. If I talk to you, he said slowly, will it help? Will it change anything? I think it could, Jennifer said. Systems change when people speak up, when secrets are exposed, when we stop protecting abusers and start protecting victims. Your story, combined with all these others, it shows a pattern that can't be ignored anymore. Daniel thought about all those people who'd suffered in silence, who'd signed NDAs and moved on, carrying their pain alone. What do you need from me? Jennifer's article ran on the front page of the Tribune Sunday edition 3 weeks later. The headline read, Culture of Corruption, How One Man's Courage Exposed Decades of Discrimination in Fine Dining, and What It Takes to Finally Stop It. It was comprehensive, meticulously researched. Devastating. She'd interviewed former employees from all 5 restaurants Hammond had managed. She'd obtained copies of settlement agreements, health department reports, financial records. She'd documented 23 years of a pattern that everyone had seen but no one had stopped. She'd exposed how the system protected people like Hammond, through confidential settlements, through industry connections, through a culture that valued reputation over justice. And she'd told Daniel's story, but not as a victim. As someone who'd maintained his humanity through adversity, who'd shown kindness when it cost him something, who'd been given a second chance, and used it to transform an entire workplace culture. The article included interviews with other employees, Jerome, Alicia, Brittany, with customers who'd witnessed the Patterson confrontation, with Chef Maria about building a kitchen based on respect, and it included a statement from Michelle Torres, the lawyer who'd worked for Hammond 23 years ago and had finally broken her NDA to come forward. Reading about Mr. Carter's courage inspired me to finally tell my truth. I've spent 2 decades helping others fight discrimination while staying silent about my own experience. That ends now. Some things are more important than legal agreements. The article went viral. By Monday morning, it had been picked up by national news outlets. Restaurant industry publications wrote response pieces. Major newspapers ran editorials about systemic discrimination in hospitality. Social media exploded. Restaurant workers across the country started sharing their own stories using the hashtag #KitchenAccountability. Stories of discrimination, harassment, abuse that had gone unreported for years. The Tribune's phone lines were flooded, so was the Golden Doors. Interview requests poured in, morning shows, news programs, podcasts, documentary filmmakers, a literary agent, a production company. Daniel turned down most of them. He was too busy running a restaurant, but he agreed to one interview with Good Morning Metro, the local show Grandma Rose used to watch every day. The host Patricia Rodriguez welcomed him warmly to the bright, cheerful set. Daniel Carter, your story has resonated with millions of people, but I want to start simple. After everything you've been through, what's the most important lesson you've learned? Daniel thought carefully. I learned that kindness isn't weakness, he said. For years I thought staying quiet was survival. I thought being kind meant being powerless. But kindness, real kindness, the kind that costs you something, that's powerful. It changes things. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in ways you can see, but it matters. What would you say to people facing similar situations? People dealing with discrimination at work who feel powerless. Daniel looked directly into the camera, thinking about all those people out there who might be watching, who might need to hear this. First, document everything, keep records, save emails, write down dates, times, what happened, build your evidence. Second, find your people, family, friends, co-workers who see what's happening. You can't do this alone. Third, know your rights. Legal aid exists. Worker advocacy groups exist. Learn what protections you have. He paused. But most important, and I know this is hard, speaking up is terrifying. There's always fear. Fear you'll lose your job, that no one will believe you, that it'll make things worse. Those fears are real. Sometimes they're justified. But staying silent has its own cost, to your health, to your spirit, to who you become. And on the other side of that fear, Patricia prompted gently. Hope, Daniel said. Change is possible. Good people exist. Justice can happen. It's not guaranteed. It's not easy, but it's possible. And if you can safely speak up, not just for yourself, but for the next person who'll face the same thing, that's worth something. After the interview, Daniel received hundreds of messages, restaurant workers sharing their stories, people from other industries, students, each one a reminder that his story had become part of something bigger. But the message that meant the most came 2 days later. A handwritten letter, expensive stationery, from a law firm. Dear Mr. Carter, you don't know me, but I know your story. 23 years ago, I was a server at the Sterling Club in Cleveland. Roger Hammond was my manager. I experienced what you experienced. Eventually, I broke. I quit. I took the settlement money, and signed the NDA, and promised myself I'd never let it happen to anyone else. I became a lawyer specializing in employment discrimination. I've helped dozens of people fight back, but I never forgave myself for my silence. Your courage gave me mine back. I've broken my NDA, I've contacted Jennifer Palmer, I've added my testimony to the public record. It's 23 years late, but it's the truth. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to do the right thing. Michelle Torres, Esquire. Daniel read the letter 3 times, then carefully placed it in his desk drawer next to the photo of Grandma Rose. Some things, he realized, ripple outward in ways you can never predict. You throw a stone in a pond, and the waves keep going long after the stone has sunk from sight. He'd just done what seemed right in the moment, helped a stranger, stayed true to his values, refused to become what had hurt him, and somehow that had mattered more than he'd ever imagined.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.